program at UNC Charlotte, along with Dr. Cindy Gilson, who's my advisor and also my committee, dissertation committee chair. So I met them back in 2019. But even before that, my school district was offering a local certification for gifted education. It was something that our districts in North Carolina were starting to as a pathway to get certification. So through there, I could, for an entire year, our district went through the process of learning about gifted education, and we could get our certification by taking the praxis. So did that, unfortunately didn't pass the praxis. So another pathway that opened up was through UNC Charlotte. And that is how I met Dr. Matthews and Dr. Gilson through that program in 2019. And then COVID hit, and of course, everything went online at that point. But then I finished that program while full-time teaching, and also my son was homebound as well during COVID. So, trying to manage him, manage my studies, and then at the same time work too with all of that chaos going on. So I finished that, and then started my PhD in 2021. And at that time, I was pregnant with my daughter, who is now 3. And so started that program, and now currently finishing up in May with a defense date tentatively in May. So that is the short version of my educational career, so to speak. But like I said, I've taught, my bread and butter is in through kindergarten through 5th grade. I mostly taught in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade during those times. And then also I have a twice exceptional son. He's on the spectrum, and he is also has ADHD, generalized anxiety, but is gifted in math and science. And now his topic of interest is history. So he's all about history and all of those things. So yeah, it's been quite a journey. Quite a journey.
It really has. You really have the full breadth of experience. So how old is your son, did you say now?
He will be 14 in August.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So Michelle has 2 sons and a daughter, and I have 2 sons, so you're in good company.
Yeah, those boys.
Michelle, do you want to introduce yourself to Laytora?
Sure. My name is Michelle Barmazel. I am the co-president of the Massachusetts Association for Gifted Education. I do have 2 sons and a daughter, all of which have been identified as profoundly gifted, and later as 2E as well. I came into this field by way of business. I was in business. I was a management consultant. I knew nothing about education. I kept leaving everything up to the schools, and they didn't seem to really understand my children. So I shifted gears. I went back to school. I went to the Kennedy School and focused on gifted education policy. I read every book I get my hands on. I watched every webinar. I threw myself into the gifted community, and that was, gosh, 14 years ago. And now we're doing all sorts of stuff. We're starting to get attention paid to this. So interestingly enough, Massachusetts is one of 3 states that has nothing. We have no identification, no funding, no mandate, no laws. We are ranked 48th out of 50. We're tied for last in gifted education, funding, identification, all that fun stuff, per Purdue's University's report. And MAGE, our Massachusetts Association for Gifted Ed, mostly supports families who come to us in crisis because the schools aren't really getting their kids, and there's no support. The attitude here is, if your kid checks the boxes, then they're done. And we don't want to help kids who have a leg up already, because that's elitist. So we get a lot of mental health crisis happening now. because of the work that we've been doing, Massachusetts just hired someone a few months ago from Oklahoma to focus on gifted education at the department.
Oh, wow.
So I haven't seen anything being implemented yet, but things are starting to bubble. So let's see if we can actually get something. As far as your son goes, I've all these ideas were popping in my head because I had a daughter who was also really loved arts and science, the arts. She's actually a very passionate artist and is about to go get her master's in art conservation. But we looked at history through different angles. So for a while she was really into food. So there are these great books like Salt, or like I can't remember some of the other titles, but I can try to send you some, like looking at the history of food. So you can see how chocolate or cacao framed changed history, or just different aspects. So if there's anything he's passionate about within history, there's lots of fun books to look at history through a different lens.
Yeah, he like I said, he's into history, also science. Being that my husband is a former pharmaceutical scientist, so he was really into periodic table and learning the different elements and memorizing them. I mean, could memorize the facts of the elements, but then he's also into the graph. So I bought him a graphic novel, which he really connected with. Funny thing with that is he struggles with reading, not necessarily like he's on grade level with reading, but it was the content that I kept telling his teachers. It's the content that he needs to connect with in order to, show that he knows what he's doing in reading. But nonetheless, I buy a lot of graphic novels for him, and one of the graphic novels that I bought for him was related to the periodic table. And so it was interesting how it broke down each element, but then it also talked about history, who discovered it, where it can be found, and all of that stuff. And he like took to it like a fish out of water and just like really immersed himself into that. So anything that he asked questions about, I always say, well, go get your Chromebook, go look it up, with parameters, of course, but just trying to nurture that curiosity within him, and that has just really been just how we've handled him, like asking like those basic questions that he always has, but then helping him go a little bit deeper into those things. But yeah, definitely send those resources. I mean, we try to get as much as we can. I know we just finished with Black History Month, but we do Black History 365, but particularly Black History Month. He did a presentation on famous African American poets that went to historically Black colleges and universities. Mm-hmm. And his poet was Claude McKay, and he wrote the famous poem "If We Must Die," which is very poignant today. It speaks to what we're going through in our political climate today. And so I have a video of him actually reciting it. I need to post it on Facebook, but so proud of him to actually step out, and he had to dress up and do the part, and he had his board and he was reading the poem, and it was just very exciting. But again, even with that, learning about where Claude McKay came from, where he went to school, all of those things. So kind of, frame the history, through just by him asking questions, and then just kind of going from there. We kind of use it from that approach, and that's been really successful for us. So,
what's interesting about what you both mentioned is not approaching your children with any preconceived notion of what's important, but really listening to what your kids are interested in and finding creative ways to keep feeding that and opening doors for them. That is really a beautiful thing, both of you.
That's strength-based learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is what the guys at UConn are constantly talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Finding, there's a story about, I'm trying to blank on the woman's name, who, it's not Jan Lapine, who teaches all this stuff. I can see her face, but she talks about this kid who would not write. He would not write at all. I can't remember what grade he was in, but they could not get him to write. But he was obsessed with chickens. And so the teacher said to him, okay, he wanted the school to get chickens. And so they had him write a whole proposal up about chickens, and he wrote pages and pages and then presented it to the school board, and they approved it, and they got a coop in the school because of that.
Yeah.
So, it's all about, using the passion, strength-based learning to make those pathways.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it just opens up a lot of doors. Just, I think as parents, we have to get out of the way of ourselves because of, and I've done that a lot, being that I was gifted as well in school, and it was very different compared to what, my son's going through now. But I have to sometimes get out of my own way and let him lead versus me trying to direct him in those pathways, and just appealing to his curiosity. I think that's just the main thing. Of course, setting parameters, because, you can kind of go way down a rabbit hole and we've had those moments, but then, we also use those moments to say, okay, well, what did we learn here? Like what did we learn? What's important, and how we can use that to kind of move forward. And I think that's been the key for us. I mean, we're going to see how high school goes, because that's a whole another chapter that we're going, that we're stepping into, but definitely for sure.
Sometimes high school works better for these kids because of the choice and the different teachers involved. Mm-hmm. You don't have just one person dictating whether or not they're going to have a good year. Although middle school is kind of like that too. But there's also, in terms of I was thinking the graphic novels, in terms of math, my kids loved when they were little. So I was thinking more for your daughter. The Life of Fred series. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not sure. No, I'm not familiar with that.
It's the story of this kid, basically, and he's a cartoon who's a kindergartner, and he's learning all about math. And it's a graphic. It's all about graphics, but it teaches kids math, and my kids loved it.
Okay, I'll definitely have to check that out. Definitely check that out.
There's another one that'll pop up. I'm just going to share my screen really quickly. Mm-hmm. Michelle knows what I'm going to share. This is Beast Academy, which is also a graphic novel from an organization.
One of my colleagues, Dr. Benna Haas, who's at the Purdue University, she shared with me with her daughter. She homeschools her daughter, Beast Academy, and doing with math, and how she was very impressed with the curriculum. So that is something I definitely will take a look at. Yeah, definitely. I've heard of that.
Yeah, my eldest now teaches at AOPS, actually.
Oh, okay. Cool.
So she full disclosure, Grayson for a long time, and AOPS was really saved our family when my oldest son was struggling, and there's no way public school could really engage with him. So I was really thankful that AOPS was able to provide like a pathway for the really interesting math, number theory and combinatorics and other things that are beyond my scope. And then the younger son coming along, being able to offer both my kids things that were meaningful, but appealed in different ways. The graphic novel approach is really different for ages 6 to 13, whereas the core curriculum, follows a more standard approach. But even the way they have the core curriculum structured was fascinating. The asynchronous pre-algebra program my kids did from Japan when we were stationed there, and it was really cool. It was back before kids all had smartphones, so it was in more like the 2017, I think, before my kids had smartphones. They actually taught in an SMS sort of like text messaging way. So they would ask a question in a question bubble on the screen. It was all asynchronous. And then the child would have a chance to respond yes or no, or put in their answer. And then that would next trigger the next question. And you could tell that the writers behind the scenes had a lot of fun. They had a great quirky sense of humor, because you would try to game it to get like a less difficult problem and be like, we're not really sure you want less difficult. You did so good on that one. We actually think you want a little bit spicier question, just along those lines. Mm-hmm. So it was for those kids who get a little sticky with challenge. It overcame that with humor. You know how they can get a little bit of performance anxiety with like, I've just got this. I don't want to be pushed any further,
Yeah.
So if it's okay with you, Laytora, while we have you here, Michelle and I were just talking about, we would love to hear more from the educators. We've had so many educators on this roundtable, but I'm not sure that we've done a great job of delving into what it's really like. And you can help me, Michelle, with framing this question, what it's really like for an educator in a classroom with 2E kids. And Laytora, you are a parent and an educator. You have an educational background. So what kinds of things do you think parents should understand from maybe the teacher perspective, and what should other teachers, and I'm going to push you to talk about administrators too, what do administrators, principals not understand about trying to reach the 2E kids?
Oh, okay. That's a lot to unpack.
So much.
That means you have a lot of rabbit holes you can
I have
explore.
so many thoughts about that. So I will tell you, being that from an educator first, how I started out on wanting to know more about gifted education was a student, and I remember his name and his face today, Divine, who was on the spectrum and was also receiving speech services. And so through my process of getting my local certification, I started to notice that, and I had at that time a second grade, third grade combination classroom. So I don't know who decided to put a non-testing grade with a testing grade, but anyway, that's a whole nother story. So I had Divine, he was a second grader. And when I would do math instruction with my third graders, Divine would, and I would have my second graders doing other, like a workshop type of thing and then rotate. But I would notice that Divine would be in those conversations and he would just start, getting it. Oh, Miss Dash, I know how this works and this, and I'm sitting there and I'm looking at him and I'm like, okay, this there's something there. So as I probed a little bit more and talked with in North Carolina, we call them academically AIG specialists, so academically and intellectually gifted. In North Carolina is how we designate gifted students. So I talked with our coordinator and I said, hey, I think it would be a good idea if instead of, doing a pull out, which she would come and pull those kids out, because I had the AIG students in my class for the second graders. And so I said, but I think it would be a good idea if you did like maybe a lesson in gifted ed, just as like a primer, so to speak, to kind of see how many kids you can kind of grab, right? Because you had those kids that were already not identified. But there were some other kids that I know that would benefit from the strategy. So I would have her come in. She would come in once a week and teach a lesson. And Divine would he would just interact. He would, and not only interact, but he would have such very good thought process and thinking and the logic and all that stuff. So long story short, we ended up identifying him. And in fact, he was very gifted. And so, to this day, I know Divine's in high school now and in honors courses and everything. So I think just as a teacher, just knowing that, asking those questions, because I think we always get bogged down with, and particularly the young teachers, is like, we got to focus on the data. We got to focus on, how we're growing kids, how they're going to be proficient, those things. We got to worry about those kids that need the intervention. But then we also have those kids who need intervention, but not in the sense that is where where our main focus is, right? So and there's always been the excuse of, well, we can't grow gifted kids, we can't, they can't show growth. Well, they can show growth, but not in the way that you think that they should grow. So just by asking those questions and trying those things and seeking out those specialists and finding out what are some ways that you can infuse that into your lesson. So I would say that as an educator. Principals, administrators don't know enough about gifted kids. I mean, there's not enough professional development related to them, and even in the higher ed space, there's one class that teacher candidates get out of the entire course during the semester. That's not enough. So at a higher ed standpoint, there needs to be more coursework related to gifted ed, and particularly twice exceptional, because you've got kids that, even where we think they're neurotypical, they're usually not. There are a lot of kids that have different levels of learning, and teachers need to recognize that. So one of the things that I wish that I would have had in my undergrad, that UNC Charlotte has, is a dual program in special ed and elementary ed. And that has been really successful because students are now in tune with understanding how students learn on different levels. But then also in the twice exceptional space, you got kids that are going to be in both areas. And so teachers are more well equipped in those areas. So in the higher ed, definitely providing more coursework, more experiences with twice exceptional students, and also opening it up to veteran teachers and administrators. And then also administrators have to be more open with how they place students within their schools. I know that we have our universal screeners to identify students in the districts, whether the district has a policy or not. In North Carolina, we do, where districts have to provide gifted instruction and an identification, but there's no say in what that looks like. So administrators have a unique opportunity, particularly in North Carolina, to say, hey, we could do something different in our building and serve more students. So I think it's just a matter of, have to take risk at times. And I understand that, funding is not there. And of course, in order to get a gifted teacher, you might have to, lose a teacher assistant or whatever, but we have to at least try to make accommodations for those students, because we do it with students that are not proficient, right? We put them through the MTSS process and all of those things and try to provide tiered instruction. We can do the same thing for gifted students as well. It doesn't have to look the same. But the thing is that we have to make sure that what interventions that we provide for those students are based in research and have evidence, because sometimes you have some people doing some stuff and you're like, where did you come up with it? So we that's another conversation. But again, it takes administrators, the opportunity to take risk, right? And making sure that we provide instructions for those students. So, and then making sure that parents understand, that students learn at all levels. I mean, as a parent myself, my student DJ wasn't identified on the spectrum until second grade. But I started noticing really until he was in preschool that I noticed some things going on. And eventually with me pushing, to get tested through the doctors and through the school, eventually, he's on the IEP as well. And gifted, I didn't push as much because I wanted to make sure that one, that he had that support that he needed. And then what happened this year is with the teachers that he has, they recognize like DJ really is far above his peers. And so they advocated for us to even kind of scale back some of the things that we've had on his IEP. And it has worked wonders for him. So just, it's a matter of all of us working together as a community and communicating and making sure that that the student is at the center of all of this, because he was really the one driving all of the conversation. But I think it's just going to take, education is going to have to look differently now. It can't be the same way that we've been doing it for years and years, but that's my wrap around kind of thing that I've been thinking about.
What you're making me think of is, basically it's all about teacher training, right? Mm-hmm. North Carolina is one of the states that actually has gifted education, and Massachusetts we in the 1970s, 60s, 70s, 80s had a thriving gifted and talented program in the state. We had 6 satellites offices that supported teachers, and with No Child Left Behind, it was basically slowly eroded. And then the person who was running it retired, and the whole thing and they moved offices and just didn't provide a space for anybody in gifted, and it just kind of disappeared really quickly in right around 1990. And we recently did a teacher training for a public school, the first one that was done in probably 30 years. And it was really interesting because this report came out a couple of years ago. I think Jonathan Plecker from was he sang NAGC worked on that, and it basically showed that in an average 5th grade classroom across the country, there are 7 different ability levels, grade levels. So we brought this up to the teachers that we were doing the training with at the time, and they said, oh yeah, no, we see that, and we teach to the middle 3, we shore up the bottom 2, and the top 2, which is usually 1 or 2 kids, well, you know, they can sit there and read, or they can be teachers trained, you know, teachers helper, and they basically just sit there and stagnate. They don't get a year's worth of growth and a year's worth of classroom.
And that's why I say with the administrators, with those 1 or 2 kids, you can accelerate their curriculum. You can put those kids in the grade above, you know, to accelerate their math. Like, they don't have to necessarily stay in that classroom. Like I said, it's going to take some courage on a lot of administrators' part to just do to do different. And I think that's what Jonathan Plucker, along with Matt Makel, they talk about, and Scott Peters, they talk about the local norming. You know, you're using those universal screeners, but then at the same time, understanding what's inside, not only within your district, within your school building, and looking at, okay, what students do we have, what ability levels do they have, and what capacity do we can access in order to provide those kids quality instruction. So, I mean, it's definitely going to take a lot of part. But then I also understand on the administrators' hands that, you know, their hands are tied as well with district mandates and all of that stuff. But again, it just gotta, you know, be courageous and step out there. That's what
Laytora, you brought up something that I think touches on that a little bit. My background is epidemiology, so I'm a scientist first and a parent second, but kind of bringing those worlds together, it's really fascinating to think about something that you said, which I think is maybe at the root of some of the challenges around doing what's needed for the kids. And it's probably not your perception, but it may be a perception out there, and that's that we can't grow gifted kids. And that's a realistic perception, I know from experience working in the classroom, because the curricula comes with a +1, -1 built-in differentiation, but it doesn't tend to go beyond 1 level up or 1 level down, which means if the teachers are not given the appropriate resources, they really can't grow gifted kids. And if they are being measured on growth, then the biggest bang for their buck, their effort, is remediation. It's not teaching to the middle. And when I brought the data to our school district and showed that the advanced kids were not growing at all, and in fact, they were regressing using NWEA map, then the light bulbs really went off. When good people have good data, they make good choices. They realize, okay, we've got to do something different because these teachers are not able to teach to the gifted kids. So that gets to your point, Laytora, about acceleration and the Hechinger report, which I think, Michelle, you've brought up before. The Hechinger report shows that acceleration is really not used nearly as much as it should be. And it's probably the most cost-effective way of reaching gifted kids because we don't need to hire anybody else. And all of the concerns and the perceptions around social issues, actually, it's probably even better for gifted kids to be able to interact with their intellectual peers on a social and emotional level, because they're finally with people who are at the level of maturity that they're looking for. And even the research on relationships and friendships show that gifted kids mature into higher level friendships more quickly than your neurotypical kid does. So on so many fronts, the evidence says acceleration is actually probably the right way to go. And if we got the state frameworks for measuring growth to align with that, the big holdup is what I'm getting at here in our district. We can't do above grade testing. So even if the child is learning, a second grader is learning at 4th grade math, they can't come in and do a 4th grade SOL because they're in an age group they're stuck in the age group band testing. So they're going to be at 99th percentile. And I'm on the Gifted Citizens Advisory Committee. I have a meeting again tonight. I'm pushing for data. One of the things I'm pushing for is, hey, the data you're providing us on SOLs, end of course, not useful for gifted because they're all in the 99th percentile.
Right.
You can't really discriminate what the growth is there. So we actually need to give them intellectually appropriate testing in addition to intellectually appropriate curriculum in order to see them grow. So what is your suggestion for me as I go into this again and try to reach the administrators and the city where we have 13,000 gifted kids? What do I say that finally penetrates, Laytora?
I think that's $1 million question. I just, oh gosh, that's a good question. Well, first and foremost, I've definitely presented the data for acceleration. That first and foremost, backing it up with the research and saying this is what it says. This is tried and true. This is what works. Starting there with the evidence, and then also, making the case. I think also getting parents involved too. I think that will be a bigger push, because now with the push for parents' choice, parental choice, parents' rights, I think we got to get the parents more involved to push for their students to get tested, beyond their grade level. I think that's the key as well too. Leveraging, parental power in order to make districts move the needle on that. Also,
adaptive testing.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, testing is a big business though too. I mean, it's millions of dollars in that. And I mean, it's just, you're gonna have to states that they have their testing, they have all that stuff, and but I think leveraging that parent power, getting parents to really advocate for quality education for their students, I think is key, as well as backing that up with research. And then also bringing in university specialists as well, to provide, additional, to advocate for, adaptive testing. And there are, I believe there are some assessments out there that speak to what you're talking about. I can't specifically name them off the top of my head, but I know that there are out there. It's just, I think that's where I would start. But then also with the teachers too, one thing that I know that was really helpful is having those cross grade level meetings, and showing teachers, showing teachers that, like, every state has their standards, so what they need to cover from grade level to grade level, but they also have that progression, right? So we know that in one classroom you could have 7 different levels, but teachers can look at those standards and say, well, okay, well, I'm teaching maybe in 3rd grade, but I can also look at kindergarten standards. I can also look at 6th, 7th grade standards, and kind of look and see where I can, differentiate for those 1 or 2 students, particularly those gifted students, and kind of look at where I can, help accelerate the curriculum for them, even if it's not a school-wide thing, but that will be a teacher decision, but have to be supported with administration and provide justification for that. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of moving parts with that, but definitely I think that's where I would start.
Those are really good suggestions. Laytora, what will your graduate degree be in? Your PhD, what will it be in?
So it will be in special education, and but with a concentration in gifted ed. So I've most of my independent studies and research has been rooted in gifted ed, and also anti-racism policy, looking at policy and all of that in curriculum and instruction. So I have some flexibility with my degree, particularly with that.
You really do. Well, yeah. I need to wrap up the recording at least because I'm going to an elementary site visit in just a couple of minutes, but the two of you can continue talking. But
Yeah.
at least the recorded session, I'm going to hit stop recording on. But I do hope that when you are all done and you're ready to do some consulting and some professional development and, probably just continuing to help parents and show up like you did today, just out of the goodness of your heart. I know that you will make a huge impact with your own personal story of being in the classroom and remembering that it seems like every educator has one student that has really changed their lives, has really opened their eyes to the world beyond, their training, their formal training. And I think that story was just really profound about what you learned from your one student and what you've done with that to convert it into a profession and continue nurturing your own family. It sounds like you're doing an incredible job, and I'm so grateful to meet you today. And I thank you for your patience.
Oh no worries. I understand. It happens.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So any final thoughts before I hit stop record at this point?
No, other than just, thank you for inviting me and thinking of me. And I would love to do more talks with you. Again, invite me anytime. Also, that is the next steps in addition to, trying to find a job in academia now. That's my job search, but particularly with consulting, definitely would just want to pick your brain and just kind of figure out what my next steps would be and where I need to go and how to move in the next chapter. So I appreciate it very much for the invite.
Well, speaking for both of us, I'm sure that we would both be more than happy to share what we have experienced as parents of, gifted kids, highly profoundly gifted and 2E kids. And the challenges, as you well know, Laytora, and being a parent to these kids are, that's something as well. So supporting the parents as well as supporting the educators and the kids, it's a big package, and you're going to have a very unique and special view on that. So I really look forward to supporting you in your career and whatever we can do to help.
But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think that